Looking at changing climatic conditions, fall doesn't always occur where it used to, neither does spring. So it appears that climate change has also budged the seasons on a fall economic statement.
The feds have yet to table their fall economic statement, a mini budget of sorts that acts as an update on the state of the country's finances. Whether and when they will has been the question of the week on the Hill, leading to some heated exchanges between the Liberals and the Tories.
Not only will we cooperate to let her introduce that fall update, we will actually give her a Christmas gift. We'll give her 2 hours out of our Conservative opposition motion day on Monday for her to stand on her feet and tell us how much she's lost control of the nation's finances.
This proposal from the Conservatives is like an arsonist who set the fire in the first place, saying, don't worry about it. I'll come with a fire truck for a couple of hours, but tomorrow I'll be back again with matches.
While a senior government source says it's coming before the House rises, Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland has so far refused to confirm a date. Our Sunday strategy session is here to talk about that. Kathleen Monk is a former Director of Communications to the late Jack Layton. Kory Teneycke was Ontario Premier Doug Ford's campaign manager and former Director of Communications for Prime Minister Stephen Harper. And Scott Reid is former Communications Director to Prime Minister Paul Martin. Hey guys,
hey
good
there.
to see you. Happy Sunday. Scott, I'll start with you. Is it a big deal, one way or the other, if this document actually makes it into the public view?
It's coming. It's like Christmas or the colonization of Mars. It's coming. You can't stop it. Just don't know when exactly. Look, 20 points behind in the polls. Donald Trump's threatening to annex the country and demolish its economy. I do think maybe being a little unfashionably late with the fall economic statement might be the least of their troubles. But, you know, we're going to see it the next couple of days. The challenge is that, you know, it is difficult to imagine what are plausible economic outlooks that you can rely upon, because so much will depend upon the actions of Trump. So I think we're going to see it. I think we're going to see scenarios laid out. If tariffs happen and they're 10 points, if tariffs happen and they're 20, what does that mean? And my guess is they're going to try to use the fall economic statement to shock people a little bit around the tariff issue and say, this is real, this is coming, this is a vital economic crisis in apprehension, because, you know, it could drive us deep into a recession if, in fact, the worst comes to pass. So that's my guess, and I don't think we'll have to wait too much longer.
Kory, do you think that that's what the government will likely do with the document? And why do you think Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre this week was hot on it, right? I'm going to give a Christmas gift to the finance minister and give her a few hours of our time to table this on an opposition day.
Well, it's hard to know exactly what the thinking is behind it, but I could speculate on a few things. I think Scott touched on one of them. Like any economic forecast that you make right now in the face of 25% tariffs is going to be pretty problematic. Like, it's hard to imagine that they will have modeled that in any way that is remotely accurate, even if they tried. It's such an unprecedented set of circumstances. You know, we're also seeing unemployment tick up 6.8%, I think, right now. So, you know, if we're not sliding into a recession anyway, we certainly will be barreling into a recession if we're facing 25% tariffs. Any projections the government makes on revenue or what the economy is going to do are you know, going to be way off. I don't think anyone is that smart that they could model that correctly. And it's talking about really economic bad news, which is something that is going to benefit the Conservatives and not the Liberals. So giving them some time to make those expressions is probably not a bad day for them. But it belies like the larger point. You know, it's only because the other opposition parties are working with the Conservatives that the filibuster continues. So at a certain point, you got to ask the question: are we not, you know, in a de facto non-confidence position? If nothing can happen in the House because all of the opposition parties are united against the government, even though they haven't, defeated the government on a fiscal bill, at what point, is the dysfunction at such a level that you got to go to the polls?
That's an interesting question. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it has been 10 weeks, right? 10 weeks of complete historic obstruction and gridlock. Nothing's getting done in the House. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's foolish that my own party, the New Democrats, have not put closure on the issue to get actually stuff done in the House. Not just for the issues that Scott and Kory just mentioned in terms of the tariff cliff that we're facing with Trump being elected and coming in the new year, but as Kory mentioned too, unemployment's up, growth down. Like, these are all bad economic factors or metrics that the government is facing down. And so I found it is extraordinary this week that and it should be noted that the Speaker had to step in to basically ensure that MPs are doing their job, their constitutional job, which is to vote on the supplementary estimate. So it's a really geeky, in the weeds document. But if that doesn't go through, we kind of get to this brinkmanship that Canadians would be familiar with in the US, where they kind of take the government to the edge of not having the money they need to operate. And do we really want to kind of basically replicate that kind of chaos and dysfunction that we see in the States almost, annually, with the government bringing to a standstill because one party or the other, typically U.S. Republicans, kind of grind the House to a halt and refuse to let money flow. And that's what we're facing here. And that's why we're having the vote next week on the supplements that the Speaker had to step in to ensure that happened. The offer that Mr. Poilievre put on the table in terms of the 2 hours isn't needed. The government could table the fall economic update at any point. It could also table the public accounts, which we need to see. Which is
also
in fact,
very late, I will
it's
say.
super late.
Yeah.
And it's like we need to see those numbers to see, where we were and how the spending went and what the deficit is.
Okay, on a maybe slightly less serious note, I also want to get all of your opinions on Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly and that article in the New York Times that came out this week that was like a sort of glowing profile, Scott, that also labeled her the next successor for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. She insists, I've been behind the Prime Minister since 2012. What's your read, though, on the timing of that, which she also says she had no control over, by the way. But what's your read on the timing of it and how that might land?
Well, my reading is that it's damn strange. Look, if it had come out in August and September, that kind of era, we're back in the pre-Trump tariff era, feels like it's an era ago. But if it had come out then in the fall when we were talking about Trudeau's leadership and whether he was going to stay, I think it would have been a real thunderbolt. But now it feels like a piece that's out of sync with contemporary political reality. If anything, the Trump challenge has emboldened the Prime Minister. You can't find a Liberal anywhere in Ottawa, across the country, who thinks that the Prime Minister is seriously contemplating leaving. And so it's a nice, pre-leadership portrait of the kind that you might do if there was going to be a leadership race. But without it, it just seems kind of odd and out of place. I will say the other thing is that if you really get some Liberals, particularly in Ottawa, out late over a beer, there's a little bit of whining about the way the PMO has been hard on those who might think about a leadership run, really keeping the clamp on them, but a little jealousy about the way that maybe they've treated Joly different, that she alone has been permitted to kind of test the waters, put together some organization. So it's kind of interesting to see within the salons of Ottawa how this plays. Maybe just further evidence that she's on her own track.
Yeah, Scott's right. I mean, look at the example of Anita Anand, for example. That's the first one that comes to mind, right? Once her kind of leadership aspirations became discussed more publicly, you saw a pretty, I think it was viewed at the time as a demotion in cabinet, Kory. Melanie Joly, everyone's talked about. From what I understand, people in and around the Prime Minister's office don't mind the thought of her as a successor. But like Scott said, I don't think there's any Liberal anymore who thinks that Justin Trudeau is going anywhere right now.
I don't know how to interpret it. It's probably very unwelcome if you're Melanie Joly. She doesn't really want to be the face of the insurrection within cabinet. So I don't think it matters. He's not leaving. There isn't a race to run in as it stands right now. But it's not a welcome headline in a time of many troubles for these guys.
Yeah, he's not leaving. I think that's the takeaway right now.
Yeah, and it's also a strange place. Like, I get the external validation of the New York Times, but if you're going to launch your leadership race, do you really want the first big story to be in the New York Times? She did get her echo pieces in Canadian news media, but it did seem strange, like maybe a PR coup, but not a political coup, you know? And she is a formidable organizer. She does have strength in Quebec, but I don't think that this was the launch now. It is interesting that it came out through her staff that she had done this profile in July, and she did have stronger messaging, if you recall, in the August cabinet retreat, and that obviously was when she was hoping something like this would have come out when we were in that whole hubbub of discussion around will Trudeau leave or not. And as my colleagues have said, it's kind of past that right now. Not that we're not still speculating in it, but in terms of the real caucus demands for him to leave now.
Well, this one also came out, I think it's kind of significant to note, a few days after, like a total, condemnation of her in the Toronto Star. Justin Ling had written a piece basically based on her performance at the Halifax Security Forum that was not positive in any way. And this was like literally as far away from that as you could get.
And foreign affairs is a hard place to run a leadership contest from. It's too externally focused. You want to be in a domestic portfolio to be running that race.
Well,
maybe that
cabinet shuffle, right? Any moment now. Reset, everyone, reset. Okay, I got to leave it there. Thanks, everyone. Scott Reid, Kory Teneycke, and Kathleen Monk, our Sunday strategy session.